every Sunday just about. And I was just simply asking, Nancy and I, and Nancy's the new head of our outreach team, Nancy and I were asking, what's the impact of the latest bill being passed with so many billions going towards ICE, the goal of 10,000 new ICE agents and multiple new concentration camps built around the country for holding people, oftentimes, usually with no due process. I said, what's the impact? In addition to that, there's been a new law that had a supermajority, so it could not be vetoed by the governor. Latino church, like in Winston, we were originally going to do one training for both Latino churches in a center point, like Greensboro, and both churches said, oh, that's impossible. And we said, why? Well, we're terrified to drive on the highway. That's like a zone where you're just going to get picked up. Can you imagine a consciousness where you wake up even afraid to get on 40 or 85? I mean, your default consciousness is anxiety and fear. Then gasoline has been poured on that anxiety and fear with the passage of this new bill and the passage of this new law. And there's many folks right now that even if they're sick and need to go to the doctor, they're afraid to go to the doctor to get out of their house. There are many folks in IBP that are afraid to leave their house and even go to work or get groceries. And so I just was saying, well, how can we Nancy and I were saying, how can we pragmatically love you? And they said, well, we'd love to get a group of St. Lucas that are willing to do errands or be chauffeurs, that they can take us to work, they can help pick up groceries, they can deliver these things. I mean, this is just everyday brass tacks things that I take for granted, that I can do all the time. And these are folks that are afraid to leave their home. And so this is a really meaningful, practical way for us to partner with and love our brothers and sisters who are under threat and oppression. One of my questions, or one of our questions was, is there liability? If you're driving someone that might or might not be undocumented and you get pulled over or ICE is involved, what's the liability for a St. Luker? And so we started talking with Trey DeBrine. As I said, he's a new parishioner who is a immigration attorney. And so he decided to put together an entire presentation for St. Lukers in what is the best way that we really can walk with and love our neighbors from IBP and in the immigrant community. So he's going to come and share with us about that. And my hope is we'll have time for good questions too. Right out of the gate, my understanding is just driving alone, there's zero liability, but don't take my word, I'm a priest. We'll find out from Trey, for sure. But then also there's other ways that might have some liability. And, to me, breaking an immoral law, to me is, it was against the law to hide Jewish people during the Holocaust. And so there's just places where there could be liability, but there's a cost to it that some of us, folks might still be willing to take. And we'll just get educated on all of these pieces. Just as we're getting going and waiting for Trey, are there any thoughts or questions out of the gate? Oh, hey, there's our lawyer. That's what happens every time Trey walks into a room. So why don't you come up here and let me pray for you. I know you're just probably coming from traffic and adrenaline, but I'll pray. And Trey, thank you so much for creating space and bringing your expertise to help us out.
Yeah, of course.
Let us pray. Gracious God, thank you for IBP. Thank you for our brothers and sisters in Christ who are being threatened and oppressed. Help us as a church. Help us as people that are really trying to follow the way of Jesus to embody your love, your presence, and create safe, loving spaces for our brothers and sisters. Thank you for Trey and his expertise and all that he's bringing to St. Luke's. And we ask that you pour your Holy Spirit out on us. And we ask that all things that we hear and do will be born out of your love. And we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Good morning.
Good morning. I did not expect more than like 4 people here. So. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm Trey, and I am an attorney, an immigration attorney at Sivaraman Immigration Law. And I figured today we can do a lot of Q&A for this, but a big thing that we can talk about is kind of how we can help the people with El Buen Pastor and how we're able to sort of, what we can do to protect people. And are you guys able to hear me okay with this mic? Okay. can't really hear myself. What we're able to do to protect them. So first off, the biggest thing I would say is really knowing what the enforcement priorities are right now and understanding that. So I think a lot of people right now are afraid because they don't really understand and they hear the news rather than knowing what is the reality. So the news right now is just thinking that all immigrants are getting deported right now. And while, there is some truth to that, the biggest thing right now is it's people without status or people with criminal convictions. So the people from El Buen Pastor who do have some sort of status, they are safe. Not everybody from El Buen Pastor is going to have some type of status, but if they do, then they should feel some sort of safety and security, and they should understand that. They may not understand that. They may not have the best status. They may not have the most secure status in the world because not everything is equal. That's not something I want to get too much into the weeds on. But a lot of people may not feel as secure as others, but they may have some security. The other thing is people come from what we call mixed status families. So say somebody might be a green card holder, they might be an asylee, but their husband may have absolutely no status, or their child might be a US citizen, but they may have no status. So they may be afraid. So what we need to do is make sure that we're protecting them and we're using the people with status to protect them. And those are the people that we're using to keep them, how do I phrase this? That we're using to make sure that they are the ones that are in public the most. So if they need to be out getting the groceries done, getting gas, that type of thing, those with status are the ones who are doing that. Now we get into a big issue, obviously, of the children are the ones with status. That's where we want to step in and make sure that we're not making the kids do all the errands, everything like that. And that's where we want to try to figure out what families are those where the parents are the ones without status and where it's only the kids. Good.
Can you define what without status means?
Sorry, undocumented or illegal. Excuse me.
That's
so,
okay.
Yeah, apologies. So without status, undocumented, illegal, without immigration status. So try to use certain terminology, obviously. And we say without status or undocumented because a lot of these people end up actually having legal rights to stay in the country and they don't know it quite often. Another important thing, if we're having conversations with a lot of these people, is encourage them to seek immigration services when possible. Not everybody's obviously going to have the funds to do that, but there are certain organizations. A really good one is Siembra, S-I-E-M-B-R-A. That's a free service. They are also able, if they go to ALA.org. That is a organization of immigration attorneys. A lot of people have ways to stay in the country and they don't know it, and they are afraid to seek these services because they think, I'm here, I didn't do anything, or I've done something wrong, and now I just want to stay in the shadows. And that is the big thing, and that is the big conception, and that's essentially the narrative that we hear these days are the shadow people, the people who live outside of the community, or the people who live in their own community, and they get stuck in this narrative, and they believe in this narrative, and essentially this narrative is created and in a way creates a wonderful community for them. I mean, look at El Buen Pastor, it's this wonderful church, but it's seen by the public, they don't see that. They see this community of people without status. So they're afraid to integrate. They're afraid to look at what they could actually have. And so a big thing that we can do is help them to really think, you may actually have a chance to be in this country. Unfortunately, not everybody will, and that is a very true reality, but many will, especially some of these children might. The biggest thing is a lot of the children may have a very, very, very good chance at asylum. Some parents will. There are certain bars to asylum that the parents may not qualify for, but the children will at this point. If the children are able to get asylum, they may be able to petition for their parents at some point. It'll be very far down the road, but because of that, we want to encourage people to get their children to get the asylum in order as soon as possible.
So I hope, sorry, I'm not getting too off subject.
No,
Can you say, is it a crime to cross the border to seek asylum?
It is not.
It is
No,
not.
it is a civil offense.
Okay. And is it a crime to cross the border if you're just looking for work?
It is, no, crossing the border is a civil offense.
Right. I
Yes.
just want people to really get that. This is not a crime.
Correct. It is a civil offense to cross the border. It is a civil offense to overstay a visa. That is what it is. So these people just generally, they are not criminals. They feel like criminals, and that is part of the reason that they stay hidden, but they are civil offenders.
Would you just talk for a minute about how one of the most potent weapons is fear, and creating fear in the immigration community, and that Sivaraman, I know, does a training for ICE awareness, so that you actually know where the ICE activity is, because what happens is the rumor mill gets going, and it spreads to the immigrant community like wildfire, and it just doubles down on that fear and anxiety.
Yes, definitely, and I was wanting to get into that too. So definitely, so fear is the biggest thing, and that's the biggest thing that we're gonna feel right now. So what's happened under the current administration is that that feel of fear that we have now. So ICE is really emboldened, just officers in general are really emboldened to make people feel that fear and make people feel that they are not able to go out in public. Wait for the jingle to stop. And that's the, oh, do you have a question?
Yeah, how can we assure immigrants in general that they're going to be safe when we're also reading or hearing stories about American college students being snapshot and reported?
Yeah. So that's sort of that's the hard part. So right now, officers feel the strongest, I'd say, that they have probably since the early 70s, late 60s, Kent State shootings, that type of thing. So right now, what we can do is really stay strong, and if we are with the members of El Buen Pastor, know the rights of these immigrants and know our rights. Now, at all times, if we feel comfortable, the biggest thing that I think that we can do to help them is to record these interactions. Now, I will say the number one thing to do is, for these recordings, to remember that no matter what an officer says, we have the right to record under the First Amendment. My recommendation, and I want to start this part of the conversation to remember everybody, this is a know your rights, this is not legal advice. During these interactions, the best course of action is to turn off your Face ID before you are helping anybody on your phone. Turn off your Face ID and use a 6-digit code on your phone. If you have a Face ID on, an officer can ask you to use your face so they can get into your phone. You want to be sure that you are clear on your phone what you have. You never want to hold it close to your body because an officer can claim that they can't see what it is. You want to hold it very far from you so an officer can see that you're holding a phone and not anything else. Make it clear that it is not a gun or a weapon. What you say very clearly, your name, first and last, you say the date, and you say what you are recording. You ask the officer what their name is and what their badge number is. If they do not respond, you ask one more time. On the third time, what I recommend doing at your comfort level, you say, I have asked twice, I'm going to ask one more time. If you do not respond, I assume that you are impersonating an officer and I'm going to call 911 and I'm calling the police. That is something I recommend only at your comfort level. Officers often are wearing masks at this time. An unfortunate reality is that they are not required to lower these masks. You can ask that they do so. They are not required to. Most won't, some will. During these recordings, you want to focus on the interaction that's happening rather than the officer to avoid it seeming threatening. The most important things to capture are the person that is being detained, if they are being detained, or what is being said between the person and the officer. Even if you don't understand it, even if it's in Spanish, make sure that everything being said is heard on the recording. If they're being detained, the most important thing that you get on the recording is say, where is this person going to be held? If the officer does not tell you, make sure to ask as many times as possible. One thing that comes up a lot is officers falsely tell people that recordings are illegal. That is not true. You, at your discretion, can keep recording. It's very scary to do something that an officer says is illegal, even though it is legal. So it is up to you whether or not you want to continue to do that. During these interactions, one important thing for your safety is to remain very distant from officers, whether or not you're recording or just watching. You never want to be within arm's distance of anybody because you can be seen as a threat. What I recommend, obviously, is there's no definition of a safe distance, but anything that you can be seen as maybe you can reach out to somebody. I say even a distance that you can reasonably throw a phone. That doesn't mean, on the other side of the room, but I'd say as far as I am from the front of the room is probably a reasonable distance. Like get out my phone right here. Obviously, you can capture it. I don't really see like I can reasonably do this and really seem like I'm a reasonable threat to anybody, but during these interactions, officers are probably going to yell at you, they're going to tell you to back up, everything like that. It's best to comply as much as possible while you can still get these recordings. Just make sure that when you do so, try to keep your phone as upwards as possible. When you back up like this. Don't put your phone down. If you're asked to put your phone down, respond to the officers rather than, just ignoring them. Say, officer, respectfully, I want to continue to record. You can, get technical and say, under my First Amendment rights, I wish to continue to record. It's very, very important if you get the opportunity to record to do so, because a very, unfortunately, dark tactic that happens is these officers will take people and they won't tell anybody where these people are. So if you can get these recordings and you can get them to say where they are taking them, then we have it on camera and we can get people to essentially get the resources we need once we know where they are. Do you have a question?
If they ask for the phone, do we have to turn it over?
We do not. No. You say that you need a warrant signed by a judge to get my phone, and I do not need to show it to you unless you have that.
This is just from a backup and data point of view. If you are recording, would you advise having cloud sync turned on so that the physical phone is not the only source of the recording?
So what I advise immediately after, just in case, is I advise sending that recording to somebody immediately in case it gets lost somewhere. That way, if you have somebody safe to send it to, it just goes somewhere and it can never get lost. It doesn't get lost in the cloud sync if it doesn't upload. If that officer snatches your phone, because it does happen, that way it goes to somebody, but the cloud sync is good. We just know, especially in Durham, North Carolina, despite this being a metro area of over 1 million people, I know my Verizon service is absolutely terrible here, so if you can send that right away, it's really good to do so. Go ahead.
For people who have concerns, I have family members who are concerned about their safety.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any utility in using an AirTag tracker in their pocket on a necklace, or would jewelry be taken away, or?
So, I've actually never been asked that question. I think that's actually a really good idea. I think on keys or something like that, that could be a really good idea, because what will happen is it will be taken, but it will be taken at a detention center. So you would be able to get it. They may be transferred somewhere at some point, but you would at least have a point of action or a point of last action somewhere. And I'm glad, thank you for bringing that up. I'm actually going to use that going forward. That's a really good idea, because you have a tracking point at least to a certain extent. Go ahead.
With the recording, is it important to try to get the person's identity who's being detained?
Yes.
If you know them, should you say their name, or should you ask them to say their name?
So you don't need the person to say the name. If you say it out loud, that's also helpful. It's not quite as necessary. If it's somebody you don't know, absolutely. But say if we're with somebody from El Buen Pastor and we know them personally, then we can ID them later during the recording. It doesn't matter quite as much. If it's somebody you don't know and you happen to see it, absolutely make sure you get their name. Go ahead.
What do you recommend in an interaction like that for the person, the immigrant, versus us? How should we interact with each other?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
Well, if an ICE agent comes up, what I'm hearing you say is a lot of the conversation would come from us.
Yeah.
What should we say to the immigrant person, or what should they say to the officer?
So what they should say to the officer is absolutely nothing.
Nothing, okay.
So what they should say, there's nothing that they have to say. Somebody who is being questioned by an officer does not have to say anything. If an officer apprehends somebody, they can ask them, simple questions. I say, be friendly enough, what's your name, that type of thing. Just say, I don't wish to speak with you. Am I free to go? If the answer is yes, then leave. If the answer is no, say, okay, do you have a warrant signed by, sorry, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Just say, okay, ask the questions, don't really answer them. Say, I have a right to remain silent, and remain silent the entire time. I wish to speak to an attorney, and say nothing. And that is absolutely what I do. If they arrest you, they need to have cause to do so, or they need to have a warrant signed by a judge. ICE often uses administrative warrants. The biggest thing with an arrest is there needs to be cause for an arrest. So there needs to be an arrest warrant, but ICE can find the cause to arrest somebody, so they can kind of get around that warrant. So if they come up and arrest you, they do need that warrant, but that's a rare thing that's going to happen. What they're going to do most likely is question. Like I said in those questionings, just say nothing. If they have that warrant, just you or that person should just make sure that it's signed by a judge, and just say absolutely nothing and speak with an attorney. This I recommend for if any of you are arrested as well. Just say absolutely nothing ever. Do not ever speak to the police. no matter what. My words are always, you can look around if you're ever pulled over, whatever, not you can look around, you can look at whatever you can see, but I do not consent to any searches or seizures. That is absolutely, can I ask you some questions? I do not wish to speak to you. I wish you to remain silent, that type of thing.
So if you are taking somebody, say to the grocery store or something,
Mm-hmm.
in your car, and you're driving, and you get pulled over,
Mm-hmm.
do they have the right to make everybody get out of the car, right?
They do have the right to get everybody out of the car.
So that they can go to that immigrant or whoever and arrest them if they're undocumented. Typically, you're not in any trouble.
You have no liability if you're driving somebody around, and you have no reason to know their immigration status.
And if there are children with you,
Mm-hmm.
will they take the children also, or if the children are citizens, do you now have 2 children? I mean, how does that work?
They will most likely take the children too.
Can you request that they don't? Like maybe you know where these kids belong, and the parents are like, no, I don't want them to go.
That's gonna be
Touchy.
That's going to be pretty complicated. I mean, that's going to be a pretty complex scenario that I would speak with an actual, get an agreement with an attorney for that, because that is going to be a custody type thing that you'd want to speak with a family attorney with, just because if you're going to be taking custody of somebody's kids at some point, that's just going to be a lot more complex than that. If you are taking somebody along and they're citizens, they will most likely take the kids with them to the detention center, because you don't have any right to those children, so they won't deport them with them unless the parent asks for them to be deported with them, if it comes down to that. There are certain procedures. They also, if there's other family, they will return them to the other family. They can get things set up to have those children be left with friends or other family members. That's going to be a lot more complicated than we're really going to talk about right now, because but if you want custody of those kids, you can get a custody order.
I'm thinking more of, I'm going to take them to their grandparents or something. I'm
Yeah.
not thinking that I take them home with me, but I know where to take them, as opposed to sending them to a detention center.
So they may be willing to do that. What I would do is speak with a family attorney, because you may be able to get an agreement. You would carry that agreement with you most likely. And that, I'm going to say most likely. I don't actually know. I'm not a family law attorney, so under North Carolina law, I don't know. I'm thinking generally that is what you would do, but I don't know a definitive answer to that. Go ahead.
It sounds like if we're helping out, taking somebody from pastor to the grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
then we got to tail them out or something, we're gonna probably get stopped by a local police officer. I mean, not a police officer. Just a random traffic stop, and now we've got this person in our driver's seat with us. What can the police officer require us to do at that point? I mean, ask for proof of status or anything, just like a random, I ran a stop sign kind of thing.
So a police officer that is not an ICE officer cannot ask for any proof of status whatsoever. So if they start doing that, you say, I do not have to show that to you, and absolutely deny that. They cannot detain you for not having status. They right now maybe can try to feel that way and may try to convince you otherwise, because of a lot of this anti-sanctuary city type stuff, but they do not have that right. But you hear a lot about sanctuary cities and working with ICE. That is if they detain somebody for a crime that they have committed, and ICE has a reason to detain them as well. So that's a very complicated thing that the news and, it's a lot of buzzwords that you hear. So while a police officer may make this person feel like they can do that, there's absolutely no reason So if they say, you know, I don't believe you're a citizen, I'm arresting you, there's no reason for that whatsoever. And that's going to be unlikely, but they might question, they may scare them. Just say, I don't have any reason to, I don't have any reason to talk to you about that. For those from, or not just from Illinois, but for those who do have immigration status, they should carry proof of that at all times. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I literally, when I'm walking out the door further, so what is the substance of the resolution that the city council just passed? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. So that is pretty much to protect those who work for the government. That is in case ICE shows up at a municipal building to say that they will protect the people who work there who may not have status or who have status and have some type of order of removal, so some type of order of deportation out for them. That's essentially to say that no, you cannot come here without a warrant. So that's the type of thing where if you're in a business, some businesses may consent and say, yeah, you can go ahead and grab them. They're saying, absolutely not. If you do not have this warrant signed by a judge, you cannot come here, you cannot get this person. Go ahead.
Don't they have to have a warrant to even come into the building?
Absolutely, and what they're saying is without that warrant, you can't do it. But without a warrant, they can't do anything, but anybody can consent to anything, and they're saying we're letting you know we do not consent, and they're letting all of the employees know and all of management know you are not allowed to consent.
Well, if we were in the building and locked all the doors and you couldn't enter, they still need to show a warrant to come in.
Correct, yeah.
They lock the doors.
Yes, but it's not that easy because fire codes, that type of thing, you know, I don't know those rules, that type of thing. Go ahead.
Well, where I work, we had ICE show up.
Okay.
We have a lot of lawyers that live in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And they told us lock the gates.
Yeah. Where do you work, if you don't mind me asking?
And, Governor's Club.
Okay.
Golf course.
Really? Okay.
We have a dozen people that are immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed up at the gate and said, you gotta open the gate. Our manager came out and gave them a one-finger salute.
Good. Shouldn't say good, we're at church.
The lawyer in the area came down and showed me your warrant.
Absolutely.
And he goes, I'm sorry, but you will not open these gates. You sit there as long as you want.
Absolutely. And that is absolutely what you should do in that situation. Again, while we're talking about warrants, I love saying this, I've said it before, warrant signed by a judge, not an administrative warrant. They use this trick so often, and it disgusts me. It has to be signed by a judge because essentially what they do is they get a warrant and they say, hey boss, sign the warrant for me. And then they show up with it, and it's not a legal warrant. It is a fake warrant.
How do you do that?
How's one look different from the other?
I'm sorry, what?
How does one warrant look different from the other one?
It will say like by judge, whatever, honorable, whatever. It'll have, you know, it will have a judge's name or that type of, you know, it will literally say like judge, honorable, that type of signature other than just like a signature on it. It will not just, it'll, yeah, if that makes sense.
But then couldn't somebody just forge it and say, you know, could you be honorable?
They won't forge that. That's probably a step too far, yeah. In theory, yes, but then we're getting into bigger lawsuits and everything. That's these days you don't know, but yeah.
Does the judge have to be a judge who has jurisdiction over where you are when if ICE came and they had a warrant?
They do.
Does the judge have to be local to where you are, or can it be any judge?
They have to have jurisdiction, yeah, but it's rare that they're gonna, you know. Think about it this way, they definitely have to have jurisdiction, but ICE is unlikely to go to Asheville to get that thing signed. They're gonna find a local judge. they're in the area, so they're more than likely going to find the judge here that it has jurisdiction.
Is there a difference between the legal requirement to answer an ICE officer versus a police officer?
No, exact same requirements. It's the thing about it, it's the requirements under the Constitution, so exact same Constitution, exact same requirements. They're all federal rights, so they're, your rights come from the Constitution, so they're the same rights.
So when recently when the South Koreans, that large number of South Koreans that were arrested at a factory, all 500 could have said, I refuse to speak to you. Somebody was cooperating with somebody to get that many people. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that just a little bit? How do they get masses of people like that without cooperation?
So I don't know exactly how. They probably had knowledge of it. They might have had arrest warrants, that type of thing. They might have let them on the property. I can speak in generalities of the most likely. I don't know the exact situation of how they did it, but the most likely thing is they had a warrant to search the property. They had arrest warrants. They talked to those people who were there and they answered the questions, or they did it without actual legal reason and they said, show me your papers. They can say, show me your papers. It's the one thing that they can do, ICE officers, and if you can't show status in the United States, then they can't arrest you. Okay. Police officers cannot ask for proof of status in the United States. ICE officers can. So if you cannot produce that, then they can't arrest you.
So what I get is an ICE officer can detain, if he comes up to somebody and they don't have proof, he can detain them for 48 hours, in which time they have to prove that they have status, or then they get arrested. Is that kind of how it works?
No, they detain them, and that is, so what happens is essentially once they're detained, that is essentially an arrest. And you can start to prove that you have that. It's unlikely that once you're arrested by ICE that you have immigration status in the United States, that you have actual status at that time. There are defensive ways to get immigration status. So what happens, and this is sort of what I think a lot of the people from Mobile Pastor don't know, is that they may qualify for immigration statuses. So some people may find out that they qualify for asylum after they've been arrested. Sometimes people find out that they may qualify under the Violence Against Women Act, and actually men can qualify under that. Some people may find out even that they are U.S. citizens every once in a while. You would be surprised. People should always speak with immigration attorneys, no matter what. You would be shocked how often people find out that they can't stay in the United States, and you don't want to find out that after you've been arrested. You want to find out before. I think you had your hand up first.
So basically, if you appear undocumented, you should carry your paperwork with you.
Well, if you appear undocumented, you don't have any paperwork.
Sorry. No.
Or if you appear undocumented, but you have.
Right, so I'm white, I don't look like I could be undocumented. That's an assumption, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look like you may be undocumented, you need to carry your papers with you?
Correct, yeah. Well, you've probably got a driver's license, so you've technically got some paperwork. But if you look like you could be undocumented, yeah, carry your paperwork. And I tell anybody who is an immigrant, I don't tell them just casually, if you are an immigrant, carry your paperwork with you, no matter what.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. Could we hire an immigration attorney for a day, set up appointments, let people come and talk to an immigration attorney about those questions?
We could bring on most likely an organization to help with that. I could definitely help with some of that. I do more of the business immigration side, so I'm not as helpful with that. I know sort of the rights, that type of thing. I don't want to advise individuals quite as much, otherwise I absolutely would. but that's something that I can definitely look into, seeing what we can do about that and seeing how we can help with that. I want to see what connections I have to find out who we can talk to get some more direct resources here. Unfortunately, I'm not a direct resource. I wish I was, but my practice is more like tech workers, teachers, that type of thing.
What can an undocumented person do at this point to try to get documented? Is there,
Speak with an immigration attorney. Yes.
So there are methods that they can go to.
For some, not for everybody, unfortunately. And some, the unfortunate thing too is for some it may be best to, if they are that afraid to leave to their home country, if they are more afraid here than they are there. But not for everybody. Some it's still better to stay here, and some, I'm not telling anybody to go back to Venezuela. That's, that's absolutely a ridiculous thing to say, and there was a protected status for Venezuela that they're trying to end. It's beyond me how they're trying to end that, because I don't know how anybody could go back and live there. But, there are some countries that, as of now, the United States is not what it was when they came here, and they may say, I don't want to be here anymore. Things have changed in my home country, and things have changed here. And they may speak with that immigration attorney, and they may say, this makes a lot more sense to go back home now. And there actually is a stipend to return to their home country now from the United States government, and that may make more sense for some people.
Just a real quick note on that about Franklin Morales. He lost his status, and they were forced to go back to Venezuela. I talked to him a number of times, and there was violence erupting even in the kids. Now, I believe as of last Thursday that he was safe with a family. His family was safe with another family in Colombia. A much more stable place. So just a quick update on Franklin. He's doing okay.
He already left?
I believe he left.
Was he on TPS?
I don't know.
Okay. Go ahead.
If the community is in need of help, they know such help is available, Hispanic community.
Could you speak a little louder?
Does the Hispanic community know that they can speak, generally, that they can speak to an immigration?
That's, I think, the biggest thing. I think a lot of people don't know. They feel like they're in the shadows and they have to stay there. So I think that's the biggest thing, is when we talk to them, let them know that speaking to somebody might help. Another thing is letting them know that they should speak to an attorney. There are these things called notarios within the Hispanic community, and they're essentially people who are not, it means notary, they're people without law degrees who pretend to be lawyers who fill out paperwork, and they create huge issues. They don't know what they're doing, and they cannot analyze legal facts and help people the way that attorneys do. A lot of people can't afford attorneys. A lot of people can, I've never seen people work harder than immigrants. Like I said, I don't do this type of work anymore for asylees, that type of thing. When I did, all those guys worked a lot harder than I did. Go ahead.
Again, so such lawyers are available through Illinois past work, because we, on our outreach efforts, try to inform the community, Hispanic community, that they can give such help and perhaps fund such help.
If possible, if that's something that, we're able to do for some people, for those who qualify, it's something we can talk about if possible. I think the biggest thing is that we'll have to figure out how to do that, because there are going to be a lot of people who don't qualify for that help, and that's going to be a really hard reality for those people. The good news is a lot of people qualify for help and they don't realize it, but it's heartbreaking that a lot of people hear that, they go in and they find out, that they don't after hearing this really good message. It's hard because, you want to help somebody, you want to give them hope, but there are some attorneys who, give hope, and I think when they give hope, they want to take money. I don't want to lie to anybody, and I certainly don't want to lie to anybody to take their money. So it's kind of a middle ground. I think especially if we can get people with nonprofits. I just know a lot of nonprofits are pushed to the brink right now because the current administration has taken literally every penny of funding, especially for immigration funding, and they are at capacity for every single client that they can take. But we can do, they can. I actually have a friend who works for one of these nonprofits, so I can see if they're taking any clients, and I can work with my networks too to see, who can take what, that type of thing.
Trey, from a where the rubber meets the road kind of question, some of us want to transport these people, take them to doctor's appointments or run out, whatever. And if we get stopped for any reason, obviously I've got documentation, I lose myself. I have documentation, but if the person who is with me, can that person be asked for documentation or a driver's license or anything like that? And if they are we, I know what you said about they can ask you to get out of the car, but what is the liability? There's some folks who really want to do this, but say they're caregivers, they can't afford to get arrested.
Yeah.
They have to go home and take care of someone, so.
Yeah, so for just a police officer, they cannot ask for any documentation.
They can't ask for money either,
for yours, for theirs, just Durham sheriff, that type of thing, they can't ask for any documentation.
What about when they stop you and say license and registration?
For license and registration, they can ask for that, and they can ask for a driver's license because you have to have a license to drive. They can ask for the other person to identify themselves. They can say, I don't have a license. They then can ask for, well, where's your green card? Where's your visa? That type of thing. And just say, I don't have any whatever on me, that type of thing. They can't say, prove you're in the country legally, that type of thing. They can't continue to do that, and you don't have any liability there. If they say, what's this person's immigration status? Say, I have no idea. That's it.
They can't arrest that person, I'm assuming?
They can't arrest them for not having immigration status. Now that's an ICE officer. That's a little different because they can ask for that person's status. An ICE officer pulling you over is going to be surprising, but not unheard of. If the ICE officer pulls you over, you don't have any liability. Again, what's that person's immigration status? I'm not sure. I assume they have some type of status. I don't know. That type, just don't answer, really. Again, I don't advise anybody speak to the police ever. I don't. The police are not your friends. They are really not. I don't mean that in a bad way. The police, I do not mean that in a bad way because I truthfully do not think that police are bad people. I am not one of those people. I apologize for being so flippant because the police are helpful. When the police are pulling you over or questioning you, they are not your friends. They are trying to complete their job, and I understand that. When the police are helping you if you've reported a crime, they are your friends. If they are questioning you, they are not your friends. They are trying to complete an arrest, or complete something. So that is a thing, but if you are escorting somebody, you do not have liability, because you have no idea what this person's immigration status is. And truthfully, I don't think you're asking anybody at El Buen Pastor what their immigration status is. I have no idea. I don't know what Father Medina's immigration status is. I don't think anybody does. I don't think Greg has any idea what Father Medina's immigration status is. I don't know what his daughter's immigration status is. It's not something that comes up in casual conversation. Just generally, I don't know what Greg's immigration status is. It doesn't really come up, that type of thing. So if you think about it that way, when you're in the car with somebody, if ICE, me and Greg are on our way to lunch, ICE pulls us over, they ask for Greg's immigration status, and they ask me, what's Greg's immigration status? I don't know, that type of thing. So you don't have any liability with that. You can't answer those questions for them. So you're pretty much safe for that. They may make you feel otherwise, but going places with somebody does not make you liable for anything.
On that same subject, now with the change in the law, the police have to cooperate with ICE. Have you heard or are aware that the police are pulling people over because there's a passenger that looks like they might be undocumented? It seems like police have to pull you over because they suspect some infraction, not because of who's in the car with you.
Yeah, so police cooperating with ICE is different. The police cooperation, it's after an arrest for something else. So the situation would be somebody without status commits a crime, and ICE has a reason to know that they're in the country without status. The police would then continue to detain them until ICE picks them up. So that cooperation is not active, it's more passive.
So if a family crossed the border, and that's a civil offense.
Correct.
And they've come over here and they've worked hard and they haven't done any crimes or anything like that. Is there any hope that they could get status? Or is that the case where they are really in the shadows forever?
I wish I could tell you yes, but it's a case-by-case basis, and sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no.
If I'm with somebody from IBP, does my being there, like as an escort, make it less likely that they would be questioned? Or?
To be honest, I think so. Yeah, I think having somebody, unfortunately, who's white and speaking English makes it seem a lot less likely. You're probably going to seem, like a bit of a barrier. And I think we can really help a lot of people with IBP by doing that, by seeming, like we are a bit of a protector in that sense, just by being the white person. I don't want to sit here in a room seeming like a bunch of white saviors, obviously, but at the same time, I think we can help people by just being a bit of a barrier.
I spoke to one activist last week who talked about this is one way to use white privilege to protect and care for the least of us.
Yeah. We want to use...
It's almost weaponizing our privilege for the benefit of the least of us.
And we want to use this privilege as much as we can. We want to, if we're able to do that, we're able to help people assert these rights that they may not know that they have. We want to make sure that we are checking maybe these warrants, that type of thing, if we're able to, because they're often in English. We just want to make sure that we're doing what we can in these situations. And at the very least, point you're making, it helps a lot to just not have this person sticking out like a sore thumb.
Well, Trey, thank you. I know it's 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So soon we're gonna have some sign-ups for people that are interested in participating. When you sign up, it's not saying I'm in, because I'm guessing today you stirred a bunch of questions and you might have more time to process. But in the meantime, Nancy and I are going to work with Father Medina and Trey to gain a lot of clarity. I know that some of the needs, some of us have windows of time where we might be available to drive, and there could be that we establish a regular connection with a particular family, that every Wednesday we're taking them groceries or taking them to work. There are going to be some situations where it require more flexibility, that it's just a situation that someone needs to go to the doctor. So who's available? So we'll probably have different categories of availability with that, but we will have, for anyone interested that does their sign up, Nancy and I, again, we're going to work with Father Medina and Trey to clarify the categories, and then in that space, we'll have another meeting for those interested to just answer all your specific questions before we officially start. But we really love, according to Father Medina, it's a real need. So we're moving as quickly and as responsibly as we can, but you should see that sign up both in the, well, we'll figure out the optimal way to do it. The challenging thing, for example, today is being filmed, but we're not putting it on our website. We're not putting it on our e-news because that gets blasted out to anybody, anywhere, and there's some sensitive, we just don't want any attention being drawn to IVP, but we did agree to video this today because there's a number of parishioners who wanted to be here. If you're interested, we'll email you a direct link, but we're only going to email it to St. Lucas that we know. So just as you know, but if you have friends or St. Lucas that wanted to be here, we will have this available. Of course.
On that note, please don't speak too much about El Buen Pastor to people, even in the community, even in friends with friends, that type of stuff. Definitely don't post about it on social media, anything like that. ICE, USCIS, all the government agencies, they monitor that and they listen for this type of stuff. So please stay tight-lipped about this type of thing. I know that sounds pretty wild, but we want to keep this as quiet as possible. I don't think too much casual conversation is a bad thing, but I wouldn't go around saying, hey friends, who can volunteer that's outside of this. I think we have enough of a network within St. Luke right now that we should just keep quiet. If that changes, then we can talk about it, but just because we have that network now, the quieter the better.
And to Siembra, right?
Siembra.
Siembra, that's an organization, they also certify people in ICE awareness. They teach you how to engage all the networks so that you have actual real-time information about ICE activity and where they are. And that's also to help tap down the rumor mill that just ignites like a wildfire of fear in each place. And so we're trying to combat that as well. But if you're interested in that, there's lots of ways to get connected. All right, y'all, so I know you came to this. If you were at the 8 o'clock service, go get a cup of coffee and then come back at 11:30 for the ministry fair and time together. And otherwise, again, right after the 10:30 service, we're all gonna gather in here and get connected and find out all the amazing things. But thanks for coming in. Thanks again, Trey.